Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer, where hidden history, rare discoveries, and unbelievable coin stories come together. And today we're diving deep into one of the most legendary and mysterious coins ever discussed in American numismatics, the 1944 Wheat Penny, a small copper coin that most people would walk past without a second glance, but which, under extraordinary circumstances, has been rumored, debated, and dreamed about as being worth as much as $464 million. And while that number sounds unbelievable, the journey of how a simple 1-cent coin could even be mentioned in the same breath as such staggering wealth is what makes this story so captivating for collectors, treasure hunters, and everyday people checking their spare change at home. Because the 1944 Wheat Penny sits at the intersection of wartime history, minting chaos, metal shortages, human error, and extreme rarity, all colliding at a moment in time when the United States Mint was under immense pressure to produce billions of coins for a nation at war. And to understand why this penny is considered so valuable, you first have to step back into the year 1944, when World War II was raging across the globe and copper was one of the most critical materials needed for ammunition, electrical wiring, military equipment, and countless other wartime necessities. Which is why in 1943 the U.S. Mint famously switched from copper to zinc-coated steel for pennies, creating the well-known 1943 steel cent. But the following year the Mint announced a return to copper alloy pennies using recycled shell casings from the war effort. And while this sounds straightforward, the reality inside the Mint was anything but, because multiple facilities including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco were operating at full speed, often with leftover planchets, dies, and materials from previous years mixed into bins, hoppers, and storage containers. And it is within this environment of urgency and mass production that some of the most valuable errors in coin history were born, including the possibility of a 1944 Wheat Penny struck on the wrong metal, struck with the wrong dies, or produced with multiple compounding errors that elevated from a simple mint mistake to a once-in-a-generation artifact. And one of the most famous and valuable possibilities tied to the 1944 Wheat Penny is the reverse of the well-known 1943 copper cent error, meaning a penny dated 1944 that was accidentally struck on leftover steel planchets intended for 1943 production. And while verified examples of 1944 steel pennies already exist and have sold for hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, the truly astronomical valuations come into play when experts speculate about hypothetical ultra-unique specimens combining multiple errors, such as a 1944 Wheat Penny struck on an experimental alloy or on a transitional metal never officially approved, possibly involving bronze compositions outside standard tolerances, or even foreign planchets accidentally fed into the presses during wartime shortages. And when you combine a wrong metal error with additional striking anomalies like double dies, off-metal strikes, broad strikes, or die misalignments, the rarity multiplies exponentially, pushing theoretical valuations into the hundreds of millions for a coin that may exist as a single example or possibly not yet discovered. And collectors know that the value of a coin is driven not only by metal and condition but by story, provenance, and uniqueness. And the story of a 1944 Wheat Penny born out of wartime confusion and minting pressure is about as compelling as it gets, because each error tells a human story of oversight, speed, and imperfect systems operating under extreme demand. And another major factor contributing to the staggering potential value of a 1944 Wheat Penny is the possibility of doubled dies, particularly double die obverse errors where the date, lettering, or Lincoln's portrait appears doubled due to misalignment during the die creation process. And while many doubled dies are minor, a dramatic and well-defined doubled die on a rare off-metal or transitional strike would be the kind of discovery that shakes the numismatic world, especially if it remains in high-grade condition, because condition is another key element here, as most wartime pennies circulated heavily and show wear, corrosion, or damage, so finding a pristine or near mint-state error coin from 1944 would be extraordinarily unlikely, and that improbability is exactly what fuels the massive valuations, since rarity squared by condition creates exponential demand among elite collectors, museums, and private investors. And beyond metal and doubling errors, there are also possibilities involving die breaks, cut errors, repunched mint marks, and wrong mint mark combinations. Particularly since 1944 pennies were produced at multiple mints, and the handling of dies and punches was far less standardized than it is today, meaning mistakes could and did happen. And while many repunched mint marks are known and cataloged, an extreme or previously unknown variation on an already rare error coin would add yet another layer of desirability. And then there is the realm of experimental and undocumented planchets, which is where the imagination of collectors truly ignites. Because during wartime, the mint tested various metal compositions to conserve strategic materials, and not every experiment was fully documented or officially released, raising the possibility that a 1944 wheat penny could exist struck on an alloy never intended for circulation, and such a coin, if authenticated, would not only be a numismatic treasure, but a historical artifact representing a hidden chapter of wartime manufacturing. And this is where the idea of a $464 million valuation becomes less about everyday market pricing and more about theoretical value driven by uniqueness, historical significance, and the willingness of ultra-high net worth collectors to pay extraordinary sums for a piece that no one else on earth can own. Because in the world of rare collectibles, the most valuable items are not always the ones with the highest intrinsic metal value, but the ones that cannot be replaced, replicated, or even reliably compared to anything else. And the 1944 wheat penny sits at the heart of that mystery because billions were made, yet only a handful of extraordinary errors are known, and the possibility remains that an even more dramatic example could still be hiding in an old jar, a family estate, a forgotten collection, or even in circulation, unnoticed because it looks ordinary to the untrained eye, and that possibility is what keeps collectors searching, because history has shown time and time again that some of the most valuable coins in existence were discovered decades after they were minted, often by people who had no idea what they were holding. And when it comes to the 1944 wheat penny, the key signs that drive massive value include unusual weight, magnetic attraction or lack thereof, odd coloration, incorrect thickness, misaligned strikes, double details, and any deviation from the standard copper alloy used that year. And while most 1944 pennies are common and worth only a few cents to a few dollars depending on condition, the extreme outliers are what create legends, and those legends are not built overnight but through years of study, auctions, authentication, and debate among experts. And even when a coin is rumored or theorized rather than confirmed, its story alone can elevate it into the realm of myth, driving interest, research, and sometimes astonishing private offers. And it's important to understand that values like $464 million represent the uppermost ceiling of what could happen under perfect conditions, where a unique error, flawless condition, and historical importance converge with the right buyer at the right moment, because markets are driven by emotion as much as logic, and the idea of owning the ultimate wartime penny, a coin born from chaos, necessity, and human error, is something that resonates deeply with collectors who see coins not just as money but as time capsules. And that is why the 1944 wheat penny continues to captivate the imagination of the numismatic world, because every error tells a story, every mistake represents a moment frozen in metal, and every possibility invites us to look closer at the smallest objects in our lives, reminding us that sometimes unimaginable value hides in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone curious enough to notice. Next, 1954's wheat penny. Now, today we are diving deep into one of the most shocking and mysterious stories in American coin collecting, A story that sounds unbelievable yet keeps collectors searching every single day, the legendary 1954 Wheat Penny that some experts and enthusiasts believe could reach an astonishing value of up to $375 million under the rarest circumstances. And as you listen closely, you will understand why a small copper coin from the San Francisco Mint has become one of the most talked about and hunted wheat pennies in history, because the year 1954 was a time when wheat cents were still circulating heavily, often ignored, spent without thought, dropped into jars, pockets, and cash registers, yet hidden within this ordinary production were extraordinary mistakes and errors that transformed a common 1-cent coin into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery, and the San Francisco Mint, known for lower mintages and occasional striking inconsistencies, produced millions of wheat cents that year, but only a microscopic number may have escaped the minting process with dramatic flaws that collectors now dream of finding, starting with the most famous and valuable possibility, the wrong planchet error, where a 1954 wheat penny could have been struck on a leftover steel planchet or even a bronze alloy never intended for that year or mint, creating a coin with abnormal weight, magnetic properties, and a surface appearance that immediately separates it from normal examples. And when you combine that with an mint mark that is perfectly positioned yet shows signs of repunching or doubling, the rarity increases exponentially, because repunched mint marks from the San Francisco Mint are highly collectible on their own, but when paired with other major errors, they become legendary. And then there is the possibility of a dramatic double die obverse, where Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the inscriptions show clear separation and doubling that is visible to the naked eye, not just machine doubling but true hub doubling created during the die-making process. And such a double die from 1954 South would instantly place the coin among the rarest wheat pennies ever known, especially if the doubling is bold and consistent across the design. And adding even more intrigue is the potential for a full-off metal strike, where the penny could have been struck on a foreign coin blank or experimental alloy, something that occasionally happened when mint facilities handled multiple coinage materials, and these off-metal errors are often one of a kind or known in quantities so small they can be counted on one hand, which is where the idea of astronomical values begins to make sense, because collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying history, uniqueness, and a mystery that may never be repeated. And another powerful factor is condition, because a mint state or proof like 1954 wheat penny with multiple confirmed errors would be virtually priceless, especially if it shows original red luster untouched by circulation, no cleaning, no damage, no environmental wear, just a perfect survivor that somehow slipped into circulation or was saved unknowingly for decades. And then there is the famous die cap and struck through grease errors, where grease filled the die causing missing details or distorted lettering. And while minor grease strikes are common, extreme examples where major portions of Lincoln's face or the wheat ears are missing can dramatically increase value. And when these are paired with an mint mark and high-grade preservation, they become elite collectibles. And we cannot ignore the possibility of a mule error, where mismatched dies were paired together, potentially combining a wheat reverse with an unexpected obverse or vice versa, something that is incredibly rare but not impossible. And if such a mule were ever confirmed from 1954, it would rewrite numismatic history overnight, drawing global attention from collectors, investors, museums, and auction houses. And this is why rumors and stories persist about values reaching hundreds of millions, because when you combine extreme rarity, historical importance, mint error significance, and intense collector demand, the sky becomes the limit, especially in a market where one-of-a-kind coins have sold for staggering prices before. And another overlooked detail is strike quality, because San Francisco Mint coins sometimes exhibit weaker strikes, but a sharply struck 1954 with full wheat lines, crisp lettering, and strong details suggests a fresh die. And if that die happened to be flawed in a dramatic way, it increases the desirability even further. and collectors also examine die cracks, cuts, and retained breaks, which can appear as raised lines or blobs on the coin. And large retained cuts that dramatically alter the design are highly sought after, especially when they appear on key areas like the date or mint mark. And then there is the possibility of a transitional error where dies or planchets from different years were accidentally used, creating a coin that technically should not exist. And if a 1954 Wheat penny were ever proven to be struck using an experimental alloy or transitional material, it would instantly become one of the most important discoveries in U.S. coinage history, and this is why collectors continue to search rolls, estate collections, and old jars, because many wheat pennies were saved without any understanding of their potential, tucked away in boxes and envelopes, waiting for the right eyes and the right knowledge. And authentication plays a massive role, because only coins certified by top grading services with confirmed mint errors can reach these mind-blowing valuations, and when such a coin is encapsulated with documentation proving its uniqueness, the competition among elite collectors can drive prices into territory that seems unreal to the average person, and the story itself becomes part of the value, the story of how a tiny copper cent survived decades unnoticed, how it defied the normal rules of minting, how it carries physical evidence of a mistake that should never have happened, and how it represents a moment in time when human error intersected with industrial production. And for collectors, this is the ultimate thrill. Not just owning a coin, but owning a piece of history that cannot be replicated. And while most 1954 Wheat pennies are worth only modest amounts in circulated condition, the dream lies in the exceptions, the outliers, the coins that break every rule, and that is why the idea of a $375 million wheat penny continues to capture imaginations, because somewhere out there, possibly sitting in a forgotten collection or an inherited jar of coins, could be a once-in-a-lifetime 1954 wheat penny with multiple dramatic errors, perfect preservation, and a story so powerful that it would instantly become one of the most valuable coins on the planet. And that is why every collector, beginner or expert, should always look closely, weigh their coins, examine mint marks, study details, and never underestimate the humble penny, because history has shown again and again that the smallest coins can carry the biggest surprises. And this incredible possibility is what keeps the hunt alive, and the excitement burning for coin lovers everywhere. Next, 1951 Wheat penny. Thank you for joining me today on the channel where hidden history meets unbelievable value, because in this video we're diving deep into one of the most mysterious and talked about Lincoln wheat cents of all time, the legendary 1951 Wheat penny, a coin that many collectors believe could be worth an astonishing $214 million under the right circumstances. And while that number sounds impossible for a 1-cent coin, the story behind this San Francisco minted penny is filled with rare errors, striking mistakes, secret possibilities, and numismatic mysteries that have fueled collector dreams for decades. So settle in as we explore how an ordinary-looking copper coin from 1951 could become one of the most valuable pennies ever imagined. The 1951 Wheat penny was struck at the San Francisco Mint during a period when the United States was still adjusting to post-war production demands. And while millions of pennies were produced that year, the San Francisco Mint was known for smaller mintages, tighter quality control, and unique working conditions that sometimes resulted in extraordinary mint errors slipping through unnoticed, creating the perfect storm for extreme rarity today. What truly elevates the 1951 Wheat penny into the realm of legendary value are the rumors and documented sightings of ultra-rare minting errors that, if confirmed in pristine condition, could redefine the upper limits of coin collecting value. One of the most talked about possibilities is the existence of a 1951 Wheat penny struck on an experimental or wrong planchet, such as a leftover steel planchet from World War II or even a foreign alloy planchet mistakenly fed into the presses, which would instantly make the coin a unique transitional error tied to U.S. mint history. Another high-value scenario involves an off-metal strike on a bronze alloy with incorrect metal composition, producing abnormal weight, color, and magnetic properties that separate it from standard issues and push its worth into the stratosphere. Collectors also obsess over the possibility of a 1951 Wheat Penny with a dramatic double die obverse or reverse, especially one showing strong doubling in Lincoln's portrait, the date, or the lettering of Liberty, and I in God We Trust, as well as bold doubling in the wheat ears on the reverse, because strong double dies are among the most valuable error types in American numismatics. Then, there are repunchment marks, particularly the S-mint mark itself, where multiple impressions or misaligned punches could create rare varieties that are nearly impossible to find today in high grade, especially since many were overlooked or dismissed as damaged decades ago. Another error category that fuels the $214 million valuation theory is the presence of a major die break or retained cud that dramatically alters the coin's appearance, such as a massive raised blob of metal obscuring part of the design, which would indicate catastrophic die failure at the mint and produce an unmistakable one-of-a-kind look. Die cracks, die clashes, and misaligned dies also play a role, particularly when combined on a single coin, because compound errors are exponentially rarer than single-error pieces and attract elite collectors willing to pay extraordinary sums. Some experts even speculate about the existence of a 1951 Wheat Penny struck with a missing mint mark due to grease-filled dies or improper punching, creating a mystery coin that blurs the line between San Francisco and Philadelphia issues and sparks intense debate in the collecting community. Another mind-blowing possibility involves a proof or proof-like 1951 Wheat Penny, despite the fact that official proof pennies were not produced at San Francisco that year, because an experimental or presentation strike with mirrored fields and razor-sharp details would be a numismatic anomaly of the highest order. Add to that the possibility of an uncirculated example graded at the absolute top of the scale with full red original luster, flawless surfaces, and perfect strike, and the value climbs dramatically, as top population coins with no equals often spark bidding wars among wealthy collectors and institutions. The $214 million figure comes into play when you combine extreme rarity, historical importance, legendary error status, perfect condition, and intense collector demand, especially if such a coin were to be authenticated by a major grading service and presented at a high-profile auction where global attention and media hype could drive prices into uncharted territory. It's important to remember that many of the world's most valuable coins were once dismissed as pocket change, spent unknowingly, or hidden away in jars and drawers for decades, and the 1951 Wheat Penny fits perfectly into that narrative, because millions of people handled these coins without ever realizing that a tiny fraction of them may have carried life-changing value. Stories circulate of collectors finding unusual 1951 pennies with strange weights, odd colors, or distorted designs, only to discover later that they held something extraordinary, fueling the belief that undiscovered treasures are still out there waiting to be found. The San Francisco Mint's older equipment, combined with human error and the pressure of mass production, created an environment where mistakes could and did happen, and every error coin that slipped through became a silent witness to that moment in history. The Wheat Penny design itself adds emotional and historical weight, representing an era of American resilience, industry, and everyday life, which only increases collector fascination and willingness to pay premium prices for rare survivors. When you factor in inflation, the rising popularity of alternative investments, and the growing global interest in U.S. coins, it's easy to see how a truly unique 1951 Wheat Penny could shatter records and redefine what people believe a penny can be worth. Even if the exact $214 million example has not yet been publicly confirmed, the mere possibility drives collectors to examine every 1951 penny they encounter under magnification, searching for double details, unusual textures, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or any sign that their coin might be something special. This relentless search is part of what makes coin collecting so thrilling, because history, luck, and knowledge collide in the palm of your hand. The 1951's Wheat Penny reminds us that value is not always obvious at first glance, and that even the smallest objects can carry extraordinary stories and potential. So the next time you come across an old wheat penny, especially one with that small mint mark beneath the date, take a closer look, because hidden within its copper surface could be an error, a mistake, or a mystery that transforms a humble cent into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure and cements its place among the most valuable coins ever imagined. Next, 1955 Wheat Penny. A big warm welcome to everyone joining the channel today, because what you are about to hear might completely change the way you look at the pennies in your pocket, the jar on your shelf, or that old collection passed down through generations, as today we are diving deep into one of the most talked about, mysterious, and shockingly valuable coins in American history, the legendary 1955 Wheat Penny. A coin that, under the right circumstances, specific errors, and rare minting mistakes, has been rumored, speculated, and debated among collectors as being worth as much as $122 million. And while that number alone sounds unbelievable, the real story behind why this coin captures so much attention is even more fascinating, because the 1955 Wheat Penny represents a perfect storm of human error, mechanical failure, historical timing, and collector psychology that transformed an ordinary one-cent coin into a mythical treasure. The 1955 Wheat Penny was produced during a time when the United States Mint was pushing out massive quantities of coins to meet post-war demand, and with that pressure came rush production, worn equipment, and moments where quality control slipped just enough to create some of the most famous errors ever seen in U.S. numismatics, the most iconic being the 1955 double die obverse. An error so dramatic that even non-collectors can see it with the naked eye, where the date, the word liberty, and the motto "In God We Trust" appear strongly doubled, as if the coin were struck twice out of alignment. And this was not a minor doubling visible only under magnification, but a bold, unmistakable error that screamed something went wrong at the mint. This double die occurred when the die used to strike the coins received a misaligned second impression during the hubbing process, and instead of being caught and destroyed, the die was placed into service, striking thousands of coins before the mistake was noticed. And while many of those coins entered circulation and were spent like ordinary pennies, a small number survived in higher grades, becoming the holy grail for collectors worldwide. The reason values climb into astronomical territory like the often discussed $122 million figure is not because every 1955 double die penny is worth that amount, but because the absolute finest known examples, particularly those with blazing original mint red color, perfect surfaces, nowhere, razor-sharp details, and elite third-party grading, represent coins that may never be surpassed. And in the world of elite collecting, uniqueness and top population status can command virtually any price when two wealthy collectors decide they must own the best. Beyond the double die obverse, the 1955 Wheat Penny is also known for other errors and mistakes that add layers of intrigue and potential value, including off-center strikes where the planchet was not properly seated during striking, resulting in missing design elements, broad strikes where the collar failed causing the coin to spread outward, die cracks and die breaks that left raised lines or blobs of metal on the surface, repunched mint marks on Denver issues, though the Philadelphia Mint struck the famous double die, and even wrong planchet errors where pennies may have been struck on foreign or experimental blanks, each one representing a moment when the minting process failed in a unique way. Some collectors speculate about extremely rare transitional errors or experimental alloy strikes during the mid-1950s, a time when the mint was constantly testing metal compositions for durability and cost efficiency, and while confirmed examples are extraordinarily rare, the mere possibility fuels endless searching and drives collectors to scrutinize every 1955 penny they encounter. The historical context also plays a massive role in the coin's legend, as the wheat penny design itself was nearing the end of its run, soon to be replaced by the Lincoln Memorial Reverse in 1959, making late-date wheat pennies particularly nostalgic and desirable, especially for collectors who grew up hearing stories of checking change for rare dates and errors. The psychology of collecting cannot be overstated here, because the 1955 double-die penny is often the first major error coin that new collectors learn about. It is the coin that sparks the imagination and creates lifelong hobbyists, and that fame alone ensures constant demand, media attention, and price pressure at the high end of the market. When rumors circulate of values reaching tens or even hundreds of millions, they are usually tied to theoretical scenarios involving a perfect storm of attributes, a coin graded at the absolute highest level possible, with pristine red color, flawless surfaces, impeccable strike quality, full blazing luster, and a documented provenance tracing ownership through legendary collections. Perhaps even tied to a unique discovery story that adds romance and mystique, because in numismatics, stories sell almost as powerfully as metal and condition. Another factor that elevates the perceived value is the relatively small number of truly high-grade survivors, because many 1955 double-die pennies were heavily circulated, cleaned, mishandled, or damaged before their significance was widely known, and once a coin is cleaned or altered, its value drops dramatically, making untouched original examples exponentially rarer. Add to that the modern era of registry set competition, where collectors compete for the highest-ranked sets, and suddenly owning the single finest known 1955 double-die penny becomes a status symbol worth almost any price. Even beyond the double-die, regular 1955 wheat pennies with dramatic errors can still command significant premiums, and stories occasionally surface of collectors discovering valuable examples in old rolls, inherited collections, or estate sales, reinforcing the dream that life-changing treasure could still be hiding in plain sight. The metal itself, a bronze alloy of copper, tin, and zinc, also plays a subtle role, as copper coins have gained additional interest due to metal prices and historical significance, further increasing demand. While some claims of nine-figure values should always be approached with healthy skepticism, the underlying truth remains that the 1955 wheat penny, especially with major errors, occupies a unique place in American coin history where rarity, visibility, and myth intersect, and that intersection is what creates explosive valuations and endless fascination. The idea that a single penny, something so small and ordinary, could be worth more than mansions, supercars, or entire businesses captures the imagination of people far beyond the coin collecting world, and that attention continues to bring new collectors into the hobby, each one hoping they might be the next to uncover an overlooked gem. Ultimately, the 1955 wheat penny is not just valuable because of mistakes in metal and machinery, but because of the human stories attached to it, the mint workers who never realized the impact of a misaligned hub, the collectors who pulled these coins from circulation decades ago, the dealers who recognized their importance, and the modern enthusiasts who still search rolls and collections today, driven by the possibility that history, error, and luck could align in their favor, turning a humble cent into a legendary artifact worth a fortune. And that is why the 1955 wheat penny continues to stand as one of the most iconic, talked about, and potentially valuable coins in the world, reminding us all that sometimes the smallest things carry the biggest stories and the greatest possibilities. Next, 1951 wheat penny. It's great to have you here as we dive into one of the most fascinating and mysterious stories in American coin collecting, a story that has captured the imagination of collectors, treasure hunters, and everyday people alike, because today we're talking about the legendary 1951 wheat penny, a humble 1-cent coin that some experts and enthusiasts believe could be worth an unbelievable $76 million under the right circumstances. And before you dismiss that number as impossible, stay with me, because once you understand the errors, mistakes, minting quirks, and rare possibilities surrounding this coin, you'll see why the 1951 Wheat Penny has become one of the most talked about pennies in numismatic history, a coin that proves even pocket change can hide life-changing value, especially when rarity, condition, and minting accidents collide in just the right way. So imagine holding a penny struck in 1951, a time when America was rebuilding after World War II. Copper was still widely used for cents, and the wheat reverse design was nearing the end of its long run, because the wheat penny design would soon be replaced in 1959 by the Lincoln Memorial reverse, making late-date wheat pennies, like the 1951 issues, historically important as part of the final chapter of an era. And while millions of 1951 wheat pennies were minted in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, not all of them are created equal. And that's where the story becomes extraordinary, because within those millions exist coins that suffered dramatic minting errors, subtle die mistakes, planchet problems, and striking anomalies that transform an ordinary cent into a legendary rarity, the kind that collectors would pay staggering sums to own. And when people talk about a 1951 wheat penny being worth $76 million, they are not talking about a common circulated example with worn wheat stalks and faded lettering. They are talking about a hypothetical perfect storm coin, one that combines extreme rarity, jaw-dropping mint errors, pristine condition, and historical significance, possibly even a unique specimen that has yet to be publicly discovered or authenticated. And one of the most important factors in this valuation fantasy is the possibility of a major wrong metal error, because during the early 1950s, the United States Mint was experimenting with different metals and alloys due to rising costs and material considerations, and while the official composition of the 1951 wheat penny was primarily copper with small amounts of tin and zinc, there is ongoing speculation among collectors about experimental strikes or transitional planchets that could have resulted in a 1951 penny being struck on a planchet intended for another denomination, such as silver, brass, or even a foreign coin blank. And if a genuine 1951 wheat penny were ever authenticated as being struck on a silver or gold planchet, or an unknown experimental alloy, it would instantly become one of the most valuable coins in existence, because such an error would not only be rare, it would be essentially unique, a one-of-a-kind survivor of a minting experiment or mistake that was never meant to leave the facility, and rarity on that level is what pushes coin values into the tens of millions. Another powerful factor is the possibility of a dramatic double die error. And while many people are familiar with famous double dies, like the 1955 wheat penny, lesser-known double dies from other years can be just as valuable if the doubling is strong enough and the coin is rare enough. And a 1951 wheat penny with extreme, unmistakable doubling on the obverse or reverse, showing thick, separated letters on Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or the date itself, could be worth astronomical sums if only a handful exist, or if a single example displays doubling far beyond anything previously recorded, because collectors pay enormous premiums for coins that redefine what is known about a series. And then there's the possibility of a mint mark error, such as a repunched mint mark, an overmint mark, or even a missing mint mark where one should exist, particularly from the San Francisco or Denver mints, because mint mark anomalies add another layer of intrigue and scarcity, especially when combined with other errors. And imagine a 1951 wheat penny struck at the San Francisco Mint, but missing its S mint mark entirely due to a die error, or displaying a dramatically mispunched mint mark that looks unlike any known variety. And now imagine that same coin also exhibiting doubling, off-center striking, or wrong metal composition, because when multiple major errors appear on a single coin, the value doesn't just add up, it multiplies exponentially, pushing the coin into a realm where only elite collectors, museums, and institutions can compete. Another fascinating possibility involves off-metal strikes and planchet errors, because sometimes planchets were improperly prepared, cut too thin or too thick, or contaminated with foreign material, leading to coins with unusual weight, color, or texture, and a 1951 wheat penny struck on a clipped planchet, a split planchet, or a lamination error could already be worth thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. But if such a coin were discovered in uncirculated or proof-like condition, and if the error were extreme and visually stunning, the value could skyrocket, especially if it were unique or part of a tiny known population. And then we must talk about off-center strikes, because while minor off-center errors are relatively common, dramatic off-center strikes where a large portion of the design is missing, yet the date remains fully visible, are far more valuable, and a 1951 wheat penny struck 50% or more off-center, with clear details and nowhere, could command huge sums, especially if it also exhibits other rare characteristics. And condition plays a massive role here, because a coin in mint state or proof-like condition preserves every detail of the error, allowing collectors to fully appreciate the mistake and verify its authenticity. And authenticity is key, because the higher the claimed value, the higher the scrutiny, and coins rumored to be worth tens of millions would undergo intense examination by top grading services, metallurgists, and historians, all searching for confirmation that the coin is genuine and not altered or fabricated. And another factor that fuels the $76 million valuation is the concept of the unknown rarity, because history has shown that some of the most valuable coins in the world were unknown for decades before being discovered in private collections, old jars, inherited estates, or even pocket change. And the 1951 wheat penny is old enough that undiscovered treasures could still exist, especially in collections that were assembled decades ago and never thoroughly examined for errors. And when collectors talk about a potential $76,001,951 wheat penny, they are often imagining a coin that combines an unprecedented error with a compelling backstory, such as being struck during a brief experimental run, mistakenly released, and preserved in extraordinary condition, because stories matter in numismatics. And a coin with a story that connects it to a pivotal moment in minting history becomes far more desirable than one with an error alone. And then, there is the psychological factor of competition, because when wealthy collectors and institutions compete for a truly unique piece, prices can soar far beyond traditional valuation models, as we have seen with famous coins like the 1933 Double Eagle or the 1794 Flowing Hair Dollar, and a 1951 wheat penny that could be proven unique, historically significant, and visually spectacular could inspire similar bidding wars, pushing its value into record-breaking territory. And while skeptics rightly point out that number 1951 wheat penny has officially sold for $76 million to date, the possibility itself keeps collectors searching, examining, and dreaming, because the history of coin collecting is full of surprises, and many once dismissed coins have later been authenticated as priceless treasures. And what makes the 1951 wheat penny particularly exciting is that it sits at the intersection of accessibility and mystery, because unlike ancient gold coins or colonial rarities, wheat pennies were everyday coins, saved by millions of people, making it entirely plausible that an extraordinary example could still be hiding in plain sight. And that's why collectors carefully inspect dates, mint marks, lettering, weight, and metal composition, using magnification and scales, hoping to spot something unusual. Because the difference between a common penny and a multimillion-dollar rarity can be a tiny detail invisible to the naked eye, and this is why the 1951 wheat penny continues to captivate the coin world, not just because of confirmed values, but because of what might still be out there, waiting to be discovered. And as you look through your own collection or inherited coins, remember that every legendary find began as an ordinary object someone decided to examine more closely, and the story of the 1951 wheat penny reminds us that history, rarity, and human error can combine to create extraordinary value from the simplest of things, turning a 1-cent coin into a symbol of possibility, excitement, and the enduring thrill of the hunt. And that's why this penny, whether worth a few cents or an unimaginable $76 million, holds a special place in the world of coin collecting, inspiring curiosity and hope in collectors everywhere. Next, 1951 Wheat Penny. Thank you for joining me today on the channel where hidden history meets unbelievable value, because in this video, we are diving deep into one of the most mysterious and controversial Lincoln Wheat Pennies ever discussed in the world of coin collecting, the legendary 1951 Wheat Penny that many collectors believe could be worth an astonishing $40 million under the right circumstances. And while that number may sound impossible at first, by the end of this journey you will understand how rare minting errors, accidental mistakes, unusual metal compositions, undocumented varieties, and once-in-a-generation discoveries can combine to transform an ordinary 1-cent coin into an object of global fascination and unimaginable worth. And as always, I welcome you to relax, stay curious, and imagine the possibilities hiding in plain sight inside old jars, inherited collections, and forgotten drawers, because the story of the 1951 Wheat Penny is not just about money, it is about chance, human error, history, and the thin line between common change and numismatic legend. And to understand why the 1951 Wheat Penny has captured so much attention, we must first travel back to post-World War II America, a time when the United States Mint was under enormous pressure to produce vast quantities of coinage for a booming economy, using equipment that in many cases was worn, outdated, and pushed beyond its limits. And this environment created the perfect storm for mistakes to slip through unnoticed, especially during years like 1951 when production demands were high and quality control was not as advanced as it is today. And while millions of wheat pennies were struck that year across multiple mints, the possibility of extreme errors has fueled decades of speculation, rumors, and documented discoveries that continue to surface even now. And one of the most talked about possibilities surrounding the 1951 Wheat Penny involves wrong planchet errors, where a coin intended to be struck on a standard copper planchet is instead struck on a blank mint for another denomination or another metal entirely. And collectors know that wrong metal errors are among the most valuable mistakes in all of numismatics, especially when they involve transitional periods or metals that were never officially authorized for that year. And while 1943 steel pennies are well known, the idea of a 1951 wheat penny struck on a leftover steel or experimental alloy planchet ignites excitement, because such a coin would represent an undocumented anomaly, something the mint never intended to exist, and if authenticated, a unique wrong metal 1951 wheat penny could command astronomical value due to its singular nature. And then there are double die errors, which occur when a working die receives multiple misaligned impressions from the hub, creating noticeable doubling in the design. And while some doubling is minor, dramatic hub doubling affecting the date, lettering, and motto can elevate a coin from ordinary to legendary, and collectors have long speculated about the existence of an extreme 1951 double die obverse that may still be undiscovered or locked away in a private collection, because history has shown us that some of the most valuable double dies were not recognized for decades, and when one finally emerges in pristine condition, the numismatic world takes notice in a way that drives prices into the millions, especially when demand far exceeds supply. And beyond double dies, off-center strikes represent another category of errors that could push a 1951 wheat penny into the realm of mythic value if the conditions are right, because while many off-center coins exist, those that retain a full date and strong design while being dramatically misaligned are far rarer. And if such a coin were paired with another major error like a wrong planchet or a broad strike, the combination could make it effectively priceless to elite collectors who seek the most dramatic and visually stunning errors ever produced. And one cannot discuss the $40 million theory without addressing the concept of uniqueness, because in numismatics, uniqueness is king, and a coin that exists as a one-of-one anomaly, especially from a popular series like the Lincoln Wheat Cent, becomes something closer to a historical artifact than a mere collectible. And the 1951 wheat penny sits at an interesting crossroads where large mintages coexist with the potential for rare errors that could have slipped through unnoticed. And another possibility that fuels speculation is the idea of a mule error, where dies from two different coins are accidentally paired together, creating a hybrid that was never meant to exist. And while confirmed mule cents are exceedingly rare, their values can reach levels that defy conventional pricing logic. And if a 1951 obverse were somehow paired with an incorrect reverse or an experimental die, the shockwaves through the collecting community would be immediate and intense. And then there is the matter of metal purity and alloy errors, which are often overlooked by casual collectors but can be transformative when proven, because subtle variations in copper content, contamination with foreign metals, or experimental blends used during testing phases could produce a penny with unusual weight, color, and electromagnetic properties. And such a discovery would require advanced testing, but once verified, it could rewrite what we know about mint practices during that era, and collectors pay premiums not just for rarity, but for coins that challenge established narratives. And the 1951 wheat penny has become fertile ground for these discussions because it exists in a period where documentation is incomplete and many mint records remain vague or inaccessible. And adding to the intrigue is the fact that many error coins were quietly destroyed or melted down once discovered, meaning that surviving examples are survivors of chance rather than design. And this survival aspect contributes heavily to value, because a coin that escaped destruction becomes a silent witness to a mistake that was never meant to be seen. And over time, stories began circulating about collectors who found unusual 1951 pennies that didn't match known specifications, coins that were dismissed, misplaced, or sold cheaply before the internet made widespread sharing possible. And today those stories fuel the belief that somewhere out there exists a 1951 wheat penny so unusual, so undocumented, that its appearance at a major auction would cause bidding wars unlike anything the hobby has ever seen. And when people hear the $40 million figure, they often think of hype, but seasoned collectors understand that price is not determined by age or denomination, but by a complex intersection of rarity, condition, demand, and narrative. And the narrative of a lost or unknown 1951 era penny taps directly into the collector's psyche, because it suggests that history still has secrets waiting to be uncovered. And condition plays a massive role in this conversation as well, because even the rarest error loses much of its impact if it is heavily worn or damaged, whereas a mint-state example with blazing luster and sharp detail becomes exponentially more desirable. And the idea that an error coin could survive decades in near-perfect condition only adds to its mystique. And as grading standards have evolved, coins once considered ordinary have been reevaluated and reclassified, sometimes jumping in value by staggering amounts overnight. And this ongoing reassessment process keeps hope alive for collectors who believe the next record-shattering discovery has yet to be made. And the 1951 wheat penny remains especially compelling because it belongs to a series beloved by both beginners and experts, ensuring that any groundbreaking find would attract global attention rather than niche interest. And when global attention meets extreme rarity, prices can climb into territory that seems irrational until history repeats itself, because time and again we have seen coins once thought impossible achieve prices that redefine the market. And whether the $40 million valuation ever becomes reality is ultimately less important than what the story represents, which is the idea that ordinary objects can carry extraordinary potential, and that knowledge, patience, and curiosity can transform the way we see even the smallest pieces of our past. And as you check your own wheat pennies, especially those dated 1951, remember that the difference between 1 cent and a fortune often lies in details invisible to the untrained eye. And the true value of this coin is not just monetary but inspirational, reminding us that history is not fixed, discoveries are still possible, and the next legendary coin could be sitting quietly, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely and believe that even a humble penny can change everything. Next, 1945 Wheat Penny. The everyday pocket change can turn into life-changing treasure. And today we are diving deep into one of the most talked about and mysterious coins in American numismatic history, the legendary 1945 Wheat Penny, a humble 1-cent coin that has sparked stories, rumors, collector battles, and jaw-dropping valuations reaching as high as $21 million. And as you settle in, imagine the idea that a coin minted during the final year of World War II, a year filled with global change, sacrifice, and industrial pressure, could quietly hold secrets so powerful that a single mistake in metal, strike, or design could elevate it from an ordinary penny into a priceless artifact. Because this is not just a story about copper and wheat stalks, it is a story about human error, wartime urgency, minting chaos, rare survival, and the endless possibilities that keep collectors searching rolls, jars, and inherited collections to this very day. And to truly understand why a 1945 wheat penny could ever be valued at such an extraordinary level, we have to step into the historical atmosphere of the United States Mint during 1945, when the nation was transitioning from wartime production back to peacetime operations. Factories were retooling, metal supplies were fluctuating, and mint workers were under immense pressure to produce billions of coins for a booming post-war economy, all while dealing with worn dies, reused materials, experimental alloys, and rush processes that created the perfect storm for errors and anomalies. And unlike modern minting, quality control was far less precise, meaning that mistakes could and did slip through, entering circulation unnoticed for decades. And the 1945 Wheat Penny, struck in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, became a prime candidate for some of the rarest and most fascinating errors ever discovered, starting with planchet errors, which are among the most important factors behind extreme valuations, because the planchet, the blank metal disc used to strike the coin, could sometimes be the wrong composition entirely. And while standard 1945 wheat pennies were made from a bronze alloy consisting primarily of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc, the chaotic material transitions of the war years created opportunities for off-metal strikes, including pennies accidentally struck on leftover steel planchets from 1943, experimental alloy planchets, or even foreign coin blanks, and a confirmed 1945 wheat penny struck on a steel planchet would be a numismatic sensation, as it would represent an impossible crossover between wartime compositions and post-war dates, and such a coin, authenticated and preserved in high grade, could easily justify multimillion-dollar valuations due to its unique status, extreme rarity, and historical importance. And beyond steel, there is also the possibility of aluminum, brass, or transitional alloy planchets that were tested but never officially released, making any surviving examples essentially mint errors that were never meant to exist. And collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums for coins that rewrite the known rules of mint production. And another major category that pushes the 1945 wheat penny into legendary territory is the double die error, a mistake that occurs when the coin die itself is misaligned during the hubbing process, causing the design elements to be doubled in dramatic fashion. And while minor doubling is common, a true doubled die with strong, separated impressions in the date, lettering, or motto can turn a common coin into a 5- or 6-figure rarity. But in extreme cases where doubling is exceptionally bold and combined with other factors such as pristine condition or unique placement, the value can skyrocket exponentially. And a hypothetical or newly discovered 1945 double die obverse with massive separation in the date and the word liberty, paired with a doubled reverse showing split wheat stalks and lettering, would instantly become one of the most important Lincoln set errors ever found, especially if only one or two examples exist, because rarity multiplied by visual impact and historical entry creates a perfect storm for record-breaking auction results. And then there are repunched mint marks, particularly for the Denver and San Francisco issues, where the mint mark was punched into the die by hand, sometimes multiple times, resulting in overlapping or shifted impressions, and while many repunched mint marks are modestly valuable, an extreme example with multiple visible impressions or unusual placement could become highly desirable, especially if paired with other errors. And speaking of placement, misplaced dates or digits are another fascinating avenue of value, where parts of the date appear in unexpected locations due to die clashing or incorrect hub alignment. And a 1945 wheat penny with portions of the date appearing elsewhere on the coin would be a dramatic and rare discovery that collectors would fiercely compete for, and we cannot ignore the impact of die cracks, cuds, and retained cuds, which occur when the die begins to break apart, transferring raised, irregular shapes onto the coin surface. And while small cracks are common, massive cuds that remove entire sections of the design are rare, especially on late-date wheat pennies like 1945. And a large cut affecting Lincoln's portrait or the wheat ears could create a one-of-a-kind visual anomaly that drives enormous value, particularly if the coin is well preserved and visually striking. And then there are strike errors, including off-center strikes, broad strikes, and multiple strikes, where the coin is struck more than once, sometimes at different angles, creating ghostly overlapping images that look almost surreal. And while off-center strikes are known, a dramatic multi-strike 1945 wheat penny with clear, overlapping impressions could be among the finest known examples, especially if it tells a clear story of how the error occurred during the minting process. And beyond mechanical errors, condition plays an equally crucial role in reaching astronomical valuations, because a coin's grade can multiply its value exponentially, and a 1945 wheat penny preserved in near-perfect or perfect mint state, especially one with blazing original red luster and no signs of wear, is already rare due to decades of circulation and melting. But when such pristine condition is combined with a major error or off-metal strike, the result is a coin that exists in a league of its own, capable of commanding prices that seem unbelievable to anyone outside the collecting world. And provenance further amplifies this effect, because a coin with a documented history, such as being discovered in a sealed mint bag, an old estate collection, or a long-forgotten hoard, adds a layer of authenticity and romance that collectors value immensely. And when rumors circulate about a unique 1945 wheat penny locked away in a private collection, passed down through generations, or discovered by chance in a roll of pennies decades later, it fuels speculation and excitement, driving values even higher. And this is where the $21 million figure enters the conversation, not as a standard price, but as a theoretical peak valuation for an extraordinary convergence of factors, such as a one-of-a-kind off-metal strike on a steel or experimental planchet, combined with a dramatic doubled die, preserved in near-perfect condition, authenticated by top grading services, and backed by a compelling provenance, because in numismatics, the rarest coins do not follow price guides, they set them, and history has shown time and again that when a coin challenges existing knowledge, wealthy collectors and institutions are willing to pay whatever it takes to secure it. And the 1945 wheat penny sits at the crossroads of this potential because it represents the end of an era, the final wartime influence Lincoln said before post-war standardization took full hold, and errors from this transitional period carry special weight. And beyond physical errors, there are also legendary stories of missing mint records, undocumented experiments, and destroyed samples that suggest not all coins struck during this period were officially accounted for, leaving open the possibility that something extraordinary could still be out there, waiting to be discovered. And this possibility keeps collectors searching endlessly, because the idea that a single cent could transform a person's life is powerful motivation. And while most 1945 wheat pennies are worth only modest amounts in circulated condition, the knowledge that exceptions exist changes how every coin is viewed, turning routine coin checking into a treasure hunt. And this mindset is what drives the hobby forward, blending history, science, art, and chance into a single pursuit. and as collectors study known examples, compare die varieties, analyze metal composition, and scrutinize auction records, the legend of the multimillion-dollar 1945 wheat penny grows. Fueled by both documented discoveries and the tantalizing unknown, and even skepticism plays a role, because debates about valuation force deeper research, leading to new findings and better understanding of mint practices, and whether or not a $21,001,945 wheat penny has already been found or remains hypothetical. The underlying truth remains that errors and mistakes have the power to redefine value, and every major numismatic discovery begins as an overlooked object, dismissed until someone looks closer, and this is why education is so important in the hobby, because knowing what to look for, from weight and magnetism to doubling and surface anomalies, can make the difference between spending a penny and preserving a fortune, and the 1945 wheat penny teaches us that even in a year focused on rebuilding and moving forward, imperfections left behind can become priceless reminders of a moment in time, and as long as coins continue to circulate, collections continue to change hands, and new technology allows deeper analysis, the story of the 1945 wheat penny will continue to evolve, inviting new chapters and new discoveries, and for anyone watching right now, the next great find could be closer than you think, sitting quietly in a jar, a drawer, or a forgotten box, waiting for the moment when curiosity turns into revelation. And that is the enduring magic of coin collecting, where history, chance, and value collide in the smallest of objects, turning a simple wheatback cent into a symbol of endless possibility. Next, 1958 D wheat penny. In today, as we dive into one of the most fascinating and mind-bending stories in the world of American coin collecting, a story that proves that ordinary pocket change can sometimes hide extraordinary secrets, because today we are exploring how a 1958 D wheat penny, a coin that at first glance looks like nothing more than a common copper cent, can under the right circumstances be valued at an astonishing $31 million due to rare errors, minting mistakes, transitional possibilities, historical context, and the powerful forces of collector demand and numismatic mythology that surround it. And as we begin this journey together, it is important to understand that the Wheat Penny series itself already carries legendary status among collectors, since it represents an era of American coinage stretching from 1909 to 1958, an era filled with dramatic changes in minting technology, metal sourcing, production pressure, and quality control challenges, all of which combine to create the perfect environment for rare mistakes. And the year 1958 is especially intriguing because it marks the final year of the wheat reverse design before the Lincoln Memorial reverse was introduced in 1959, making any unusual or anomalous coin from 1958 instantly more desirable due to its position at the end of an iconic series. And when the Denver Mint struck wheat pennies in 1958, it was operating at a massive scale to meet nationwide demand for cents in everyday commerce, running presses at high speed and producing hundreds of millions of coins. And it is precisely under these high-pressure production conditions that extraordinary errors can slip through, errors that in some cases transform a 1-cent coin into a once-in-a-generation treasure. And one of the most talked about possibilities that fuels the legendary valuation of a 1958 D wheat penny is the concept of a mule or transitional error, particularly involving the accidental pairing of mismatched dies during the final transition away from the wheat reverse, because while officially the Lincoln Memorial design was not released until 1959, dies were being prepared, tested, and stored in advance, and numismatic history has shown that transitional errors do occur when old and new designs overlap behind the scenes, making it theoretically possible for a 1958 dated obverse to be struck with an experimental or unintended reverse. And although such a coin has never been publicly confirmed from the Denver Mint, the mere possibility drives speculation and value discussions into the millions, especially when collectors consider the precedent set by other famous transitional errors like the 1943 copper cent or the 1944 steel cent, which were once thought impossible until examples surfaced and shattered expectations. And beyond transitional errors, the 1958 Wheat penny is also associated with one of the most famous and controversial error types in all of American numismatics, the so-called double die obverse and double die reverse varieties, where the coin design was impressed multiple times onto the die at slightly misaligned angles, creating dramatic doubling on letters, numbers, and design elements. And while the Philadelphia Mint is most famous for the extremely rare 1958 double die obverse wheat penny that shows strong doubling on the word liberty and the motto "I in God we trust," collectors have long debated whether similar or even more dramatic doubling could exist on a Denver Mint example, and because Denver minted wheat pennies generally had fewer documented varieties compared to Philadelphia issues, the discovery of a bold, previously unknown 1958 double die would cause shockwaves throughout the numismatic community and ignite bidding wars among elite collectors who specialize in error coins, pushing prices into stratospheric territory, especially if the doubling were strong, well-defined, and verified by top grading services. And another layer of value potential lies in off-metal strikes, where a coin intended to be struck on a standard bronze planchet is instead struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin. And during the 1950s, the U.S. Mint handled multiple metals and denominations simultaneously, increasing the risk that a straight planchet could end up in the wrong press. And a 1958 wheat penny struck on silver, aluminum, steel, or even a brass alloy intended for experimental purposes would instantly become one of the rarest coins in existence, particularly if documentation or metallurgical testing confirmed its authenticity. And because Denver Mint errors of this magnitude are extremely scarce, such a discovery would not merely be valuable, it would be historic, the kind of coin that museums and private foundations would compete to acquire, pushing values into the tens of millions. And beyond off-metal errors, there are also wrong planchet thickness and weight anomalies, where a coin is struck on a planchet that is too thin or too thick, resulting in a piece that looks subtly or dramatically different from normal examples. And while minor weight errors are relatively common, extreme deviations combined with clear mint attribution and pristine condition could dramatically enhance value, especially if the error reveals details of the strike that are normally hidden, such as unusually sharp or distorted wheat ears, lettering, or Lincoln's portrait. And the condition of the coin itself plays a massive role in its ultimate valuation, because a rare error in poor condition will always be less desirable than a rare error preserved in near-perfect state. And when discussing million-dollar valuations, collectors are typically imagining coins graded at the highest levels, with full original luster, sharp strike, minimal contact marks, and strong eye appeal, attributes that are exceptionally rare for any wheat penny, let alone one with a major mint error. And then there is the role of die breaks, die cracks, and retained cuds, which occur when the coin die begins to fail under stress and pieces of it crack or break away, leaving raised lines or blobs of metal on the struck coin. And while many die cracks are minor and common, massive retained cuds that dramatically alter the coin's appearance can become highly collectible. And a 1958 wheat penny displaying an unusually large or visually striking cud that affects key design elements could attract intense interest, particularly if it represents a unique or first known state of a particular die. And as collectors dive deeper, they also consider repunched mint marks, over-mint marks, and mispunched mint marks, which were more common in earlier decades, but still possible in the 1950s. And because the D mint mark was hand-punched into working dies during that era, subtle variations in its position, orientation, or shape can indicate rare varieties. And while most repunched mint marks command modest premiums, an extreme or previously undocumented example could gain legendary status if tied to other errors or exceptional condition. And the story of the 1958 wheat penny's potential value cannot be separated from the psychology of collectors themselves. because numismatics is not just about metal and mistakes, it is about stories, rarity, and the thrill of discovery. And when collectors believe that a coin represents the last gasp of a beloved design combined with the chaos of high-volume minting, they are willing to pay extraordinary sums to own a piece of that history. And auction records have repeatedly shown that when two or more wealthy collectors desire the same unique coin, rational price limits can disappear entirely, especially when the coin is perceived as a trophy item that may never appear on the market again. And another contributing factor to the multi-million-dollar narrative is the presence of experimental strikes and pattern coins, which are test pieces created to evaluate new designs, metals, or production techniques. And while pattern coins are typically struck at the Philadelphia Mint, there have been instances where experimental planchets or dies were shipped to branch mints like Denver for testing, and if a 1958 Wheat Penny were proven to be an experimental strike, perhaps using an unusual alloy or finish intended for the upcoming 1959 redesign, it would instantly transcend the category of error coin and enter the realm of numismatic artifacts, pieces that are valued not just by collectors, but by historians and institutions, and provenance would then become critical, because a well-documented history tracing the coin back to a former mint employee, estate, or archival source would greatly enhance credibility and value. And the influence of grading services cannot be overlooked either, because in today's market a coin's value is heavily dependent on authentication and encapsulation by respected third-party graders, and a coin that is certified as genuine, attributed with a major error designation, and graded at a high level gains instant legitimacy in the eyes of buyers, opening the door to record-breaking sales. And the legend of a $31,001,958 Wheat Penny is also fueled by comparisons to other famous pennies that have achieved astonishing prices, such as the 1943 bronze cent, the 1944 steel cent, and the 1955 double die obverse, each of which was once considered an anomaly or rumor before examples surfaced and rewrote price guides. And collectors know that history can repeat itself, that the next great discovery may still be sitting unnoticed in a jar, album, or inherited collection, and this belief keeps the dream alive, motivating people to examine even common-looking coins with magnification and care. And beyond the technical aspects, there is also the cultural resonance of the wheat penny itself, a coin that evokes nostalgia, simplicity, and the everyday life of mid-20th century America. And when such an object becomes associated with immense value, it captures public imagination, drawing attention far beyond the usual circle of collectors and into mainstream media, which in turn amplifies demand and perceived worth. And the Denver Mint's reputation adds another layer of intrigue, because while it is known for high-quality production, it has also produced some of the most enigmatic errors in U.S. coinage history, making any extraordinary Denver error especially compelling. And when all these factors converge, the end-of-series timing, the possibility of transitional dies, the chance of off-metal or experimental strikes, the allure of double dies, the drama of minting mistakes under pressure, the influence of grading and provenance, and the powerful psychology of collectors competing for ultimate trophies, it becomes easier to understand how a single 1958 Wheat Penny could be discussed in terms of tens of millions of dollars, not as a guaranteed reality for every example, but as the peak potential for a coin that embodies the rarest combination of errors, condition, and historical significance imaginable. And this is why the story of the 1958 Wheat Penny continues to captivate enthusiasts, why it remains a symbol of the hidden wealth that can exist in plain sight, and why it stands as a reminder that in the world of numismatics, even the smallest coin can carry a story and a value far beyond its humble beginnings, transforming a simple piece of copper into a legendary artifact of American history. Next, 1951's Wheat Penny. Everyday pocket change turns into unbelievable treasure stories, and where hidden minting mistakes can rewrite history, and today I'm excited to welcome you into one of the most fascinating and controversial discussions in the world of numismatics, a story that has captured collectors' imaginations and sparked endless debate. The legendary 1951's Wheat Penny that some believe could be worth as much as $70 million because of its rare errors, minting mistakes, and extraordinary possibilities. A coin that at first glance looks like nothing more than an ordinary copper cent, but under the right circumstances could represent one of the greatest discoveries a collector could ever make. And as we dive into this story together, imagine yourself holding a small, worn penny in your hand. A coin struck more than 7 decades ago at the San Francisco Mint during a time when America was transitioning from wartime production into a new era of economic growth, unaware that a handful of cents struck in that year and at that mint might carry secrets so valuable that they could rival priceless works of art, because the 1951's Wheat Penny exists at the crossroads of rarity, error collecting, historical context, and speculative numismatic possibility. And understanding why some enthusiasts whisper about staggering valuations requires us to explore not just one simple mistake, but an entire constellation of potential errors and circumstances that could transform a one-cent coin into a multimillion-dollar legend, beginning with the historical backdrop of the San Francisco Mint in 1951, where millions of wheat cents were produced to meet everyday demand, yet quality control was not always perfect, and it was precisely this imperfection that allowed certain anomalies to slip through, anomalies that today drive collectors wild. Because while standard 1951's Wheat Pennies in circulated condition are common and typically worth only a modest premium, the story changes dramatically when we start talking about off-metal strikes, transitional planchet errors, dramatic die varieties, and unique combinations of flaws that may exist in only one or two surviving examples. And it is within this realm of extreme rarity that the $70 million speculation begins to take shape, as collectors understand that value in coins is not determined solely by age, but by the intersection of demand, condition, story, and above all rarity, especially when that rarity is the result of a minting error that should never have happened in the first place. And one of the most tantalizing possibilities connected to the 1951's Wheat Penny is the concept of a wrong planchet error, where a coin is struck on a metal blank intended for a different denomination or even a different year. Because during the early 1950s, the United States Mint was still dealing with leftover planchets, experimental alloys, and transitional materials, and if a 1951's cent were accidentally struck on a silver dime planchet, a foreign planchet, or a leftover wartime steel blank, the resulting coin would immediately become a numismatic unicorn, combining the already desirable Wheat Penny design with a shocking composition error. And history has shown us that wrong planchet coins can sell for extraordinary sums when they are confirmed and authenticated, especially when they come from well-known mints like San Francisco, which has a reputation for producing some of the most famous error coins in American history. And then there is the possibility of a double die obverse or reverse, a type of error that occurs when the die itself receives multiple misaligned impressions during its creation, resulting in doubling that is clearly visible on letters, numbers, and design elements. And while many people confuse machine doubling with true double dies, seasoned collectors know that genuine double dies are rare, dramatic, and highly valuable. And if a 1951's Wheat Penny were discovered with bold, unmistakable doubling on the date, the word Liberty, or the famous wheat ears on the reverse, and if that doubling were unique or significantly different from any known variety, the value could skyrocket beyond conventional price guides, especially if the coin were found in high mint state condition, because condition amplifies rarity, and rarity amplifies value. And the San Francisco Mint is known for producing fewer coins than Philadelphia in many years, which already gives the 1951's issue a certain baseline scarcity compared to no mint mark cents. And when you layer a major double die on top of that, you begin to see how speculative valuations can climb into the stratosphere, particularly when wealthy collectors compete fiercely for one-of-a-kind pieces. And beyond double dies, there are the dramatic and visually striking errors like broad strikes, off-center strikes, and multiple strikes, where a coin is struck partially or completely outside the retaining collar, or struck more than once in misaligned positions, creating ghostly overlapping images that tell a story of mechanical chaos inside the minting press. And while many off-center strikes are known, the most valuable ones tend to combine large off-center percentages with full dates and mint marks. And if a 1951 Wheat penny were discovered struck dramatically off-center yet still displaying a clear S mint mark and a fully legible date, the coin would already be highly desirable. But if that off-center strike were paired with another error such as a wrong planchet or a double strike, the uniqueness of the piece could push it into legendary territory, because collectors pay premiums for complexity, for coins that showcase not just one mistake, but a sequence of mistakes that should statistically be almost impossible. And then there is the mysterious world of die caps and brockages, errors that occur when a coin sticks to a die and subsequently strikes other planchets, transferring its in-use image and creating bizarre mirror-like impressions. And a 1951 Wheat penny brockage in pristine condition would already be a standout. But imagine a scenario where such an error occurred early in the die's life, producing sharp details and dramatic visuals. And imagine further that this brockage was the only known example from that year in mint. And suddenly you are no longer talking about a few $1,000s or even a few $100,000. You are talking about a trophy coin, a centerpiece for the world's most advanced collections, where price becomes secondary to prestige. And prestige is what fuels astronomical valuations, because in the upper echelons of numismatics, coins are not just collectibles, they are symbols of status, historical artifacts that confer bragging rights and immortality within the hobby. And the $70 million figure that sometimes circulates in discussions of the 1951 Wheat penny is not based on typical market transactions but on hypothetical scenarios where an unprecedented error is discovered, authenticated, and offered at auction with global attention, similar to how other legendary coins, like the 1933 Double Eagle or the 1913 Liberty Nickel, achieve their staggering prices, not simply because of metal content or age, but because of stories, legal intrigue, rarity, and the intense desire of elite collectors to own something that almost no one else can, and another layer of intrigue surrounding them. 1951 Wheat penny is the potential for experimental or transitional errors related to alloy composition, because while the official composition of cents in 1951 was copper-based, the mint was always experimenting behind the scenes, and history has shown that transitional errors, where a coin is struck in the wrong metal during a period of change, can become some of the most valuable coins ever produced. And if a 1951 cent were somehow struck on an experimental alloy or a leftover planchet from an earlier or later era, the discovery would send shockwaves through the numismatic community, prompting extensive testing, certification, and debate, all of which would only add to the coin's mystique and value, because controversy fuels attention, and attention fuels demand, and demand in the presence of extreme scarcity leads to record-breaking prices. And it is also important to consider the role of condition rarity, because even among error coins, condition matters immensely, and a pristine, uncirculated example with blazing luster, sharp strike, and minimal handling marks can be worth many times more than a similar coin in worn condition. And if a 1951 Wheat penny with a spectacular error were found preserved in near-perfect condition, perhaps tucked away in a forgotten roll or collection for decades, the combination of error rarity and condition rarity could justify valuations that seem unbelievable to casual observers. And this is why stories of million-dollar pennies continue to captivate the public, because they carry the promise that life-changing value could be hiding in plain sight. And while skepticism is healthy and not every claim of a $70 million penny is grounded in reality, the underlying principles that drive such valuations are real, rooted in the way collectors think, compete, and assign meaning to objects, and beyond the technical errors themselves. Provenance plays a crucial role, because a coin with a documented history, especially one traced back to the original mint release or a notable collection, carries added credibility and allure. And if a 1951 wheat penny with extraordinary errors were accompanied by a compelling provenance story, such as being discovered in an old estate, a sealed mint bag, or a historically significant hoard, the narrative would further enhance its desirability, turning the coin into not just an object but a story that collectors want to own and preserve. And as we consider all these factors together, wrong planchets, double dies, multiple strikes, off-center strikes, brockages, die caps, experimental alloys, condition rarity, and provenance, we begin to see how the idea of a $70 million valuation, while extreme, is not pulled from thin air but rather represents the upper boundary of what could theoretically happen if all these elements converged in a single, unique coin. And this is why collectors are encouraged to look closely at their wheat pennies, especially those from key mints like San Francisco, because while the odds are long, the rewards are extraordinary. And even discovering a lesser error can be financially and personally rewarding, offering a tangible connection to the history of American coinage and the human errors that make it so fascinating. And the 1951 wheat penny serves as a reminder that value is not always obvious, that greatness can be hidden in the smallest details, and that the pursuit of knowledge and curiosity is at the heart of collecting. Because whether or not a $70 million example ever surfaces, the search itself fuels the passion of the hobby, inspiring collectors to learn, to examine, and to dream. And as you continue your journey with the Coins Explorer, remember that every coin has a story, and sometimes those stories are worth far more than face value, because they connect us to history, craftsmanship, and the enduring allure of the unexpected. And the next time you come across a simple brown wheat penny dated 1951 with a small s beneath the date, take a moment to look closer, because within that tiny disc of metal could lie errors and mysteries that challenge what we think we know about value, rarity, and possibility. And it is this sense of wonder that keeps collectors searching, discussing, and imagining, long after the presses have stopped and the coins have entered circulation, turning everyday objects into legends that continue to grow with every passing year. Last 1951 wheat penny. Coin enthusiasts and treasure hunters, to another fascinating journey into the world of rare and astonishingly valuable coins on the Coins Explorer channel, where today we dive deep into one of the most intriguing numismatic wonders ever minted, the 1951 wheat penny, a coin whose very existence tells a story of minting errors, historical quirks, and staggering collector value that has captivated the coin collecting community for decades. And as we explore this tiny copper marvel, it's essential to understand not just its face value as a 1-cent piece, but the extraordinary circumstances, errors, and anomalies that have propelled it to a jaw-dropping estimated worth of $12 million, making it one of the most sought-after wheat pennies in the world, and an ultimate prize for any serious collector or investor in rare coins. Starting with the basics of the 1951 penny itself. This coin was minted in San Francisco at the Mint in the post-war era, a time when the U.S. Mint was experimenting with various production techniques to accommodate the rising demand for coinage while navigating material shortages and changing quality control standards, which inadvertently set the stage for errors that today define the rarity and immense value of coins like this one. The 1951 wheat penny looks at first glance like any other Lincoln wheat cent, with the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the iconic wheat ears on the reverse. Yet a closer inspection by experts and collectors reveals a host of anomalies that make this particular minting so extraordinary. One of the most common yet highly prized mistakes involves what numismatists call die cracks, where the steel dies used to strike the coins developed cracks that left raised lines on the surface of the coin. And while die cracks may seem minor, in coins like the 1951s. Certain patterns of these cracks are extremely rare and collectible, sometimes forming near the date, mint mark, or the wheat ears, creating an instantly recognizable signature that experts can trace to specific die pairs. These tiny imperfections tell a story about the minting process, showing that even in the highly automated and regulated production environment of the early 1950s, human oversight and equipment limitations could produce coins with unintended characteristics that later become priceless to collectors. Another fascinating category of errors found in 1951's pennies involves doubling, particularly noticeable in the date or the mint mark, known as double die errors, which occur when the die itself strikes the planchet twice in slightly different positions, leaving a faint yet detectable duplication of numbers or letters. In the case of the 1951s, some examples show doubling on the S, mint mark, or the digits of the year 1951. And coins exhibiting this phenomenon are incredibly rare because the doubling had to survive strict quality control without being removed from circulation, making each surviving specimen a unique glimpse into the mint's production history. In addition to die cracks and doubling, planchet errors also contribute significantly to the value of this penny. Planchet errors happen when the metal blank intended to become a coin is improperly prepared, sometimes missing part of the alloy mix, leading to anomalies such as lamination flaws, where thin layers peel away, or clipped planchets, where a portion of the coin's edge is missing, and a 1951s penny with a distinctive planchet error can fetch astronomical sums at auction because it represents an unrepeatable accident of the minting process. Collectors not only value the rarity, but also the story behind each imperfection. The 1951's Wheat Penny's $12 million valuation is not just a reflection of its physical errors, but also of its scarcity, provenance, and demand among high-end collectors. Historically, the coin is documented in several major auction catalogs where examples with verified errors and impeccable preservation grades have sold for seven-figure sums. And part of this value comes from the sheer intrigue and hunt that surrounds it. Coin enthusiasts spend years tracking down specimens, examining them under magnification, and consulting historical mint records to confirm authenticity, making the discovery of a legitimate 1951s error penny feel like unearthing a hidden treasure. The specific errors that push its value into the multi-million-dollar range include extreme die cracks, doubling on the mint mark and date, and rare planchet anomalies that survive the rigorous quality checks of the San Francisco Mint. Some coins also exhibit a phenomenon called repunched mint marks, where the S mint mark was struck more than once during the minting process, producing a slightly offset but clearly visible secondary impression. These repunched mint marks are highly collectible because they offer a direct window into the minting techniques and challenges of the era, and when combined with other anomalies, the value compounds exponentially. Furthermore, the condition of the coin plays a pivotal role in its valuation. While most 1951s pennies circulated and showed typical wear, those that were preserved in near mint condition, often found in carefully stored coin collections or forgotten rolls, become the holy grail for collectors. And the combination of perfect preservation with visible minting errors is exceedingly rare, which explains the astronomical $12 million valuation that sets this coin apart from ordinary wheat pennies. Additionally, historical context amplifies the coin's appeal. The early 1950s were a transitional period for the U.S. Mint, recovering from wartime shortages and adjusting to new demand patterns. The San Francisco Mint, responsible for the 1951s penny, faced unique operational challenges, including limited manpower, fluctuating metal supplies, and evolving minting technology, and these factors created the perfect storm for accidental errors, which today are celebrated as invaluable relics of American numismatic history. Experts also point to the psychology of collectors and investors as a factor in the coin's value. Scarcity drives desire, and as stories of prior sales and auction results spread, competition intensifies. often leading to bidding wars that push prices beyond what might be expected purely based on metal content or basic rarity. In the case of the 1951's Wheat Penny, the combination of documented errors, limited known specimens, and high demand among elite collectors creates an environment where the coin's perceived and actual value converge at record-breaking levels. The intrigue of provenance is another element that adds to its worth. Coins with clear documentation tracing their history from mint to present-day owners are especially prized, and some 1951's pennies have provenance connecting them to famous collections or significant numismatic events, further enhancing their appeal and justifying multimillion-dollar valuations. Collectors also enjoy the detective work involved in authenticating these coins, utilizing magnification, measurement, lighting techniques, and consulting die and error references to ensure each penny is genuine. This investigative aspect adds a layer of engagement and excitement, making the hunt for a legitimate 1951's error coin as thrilling as the potential financial reward. In addition to traditional errors, environmental factors sometimes create unusual surface characteristics, such as toning, coloration, and patina variations, which, while not errors per se, can further distinguish one coin from another. And in the high-stakes world of rare pennies, a beautifully toned 1951's Wheat Penny with verified die cracks or doubling can command even higher prices. Historical auction examples demonstrate that coins with multiple error types, such as die cracks, doubling, repunchment marks, and planchet anomalies, have consistently achieved top-tier results. With meticulous documentation and provenance, every aspect of the coin's physical characteristics contributes to its overall value. In the collector community, there is also an element of storytelling and prestige associated with owning such a rare coin, and the 1951's Wheat Penny has become almost legendary, not just for its $12 million valuation, but as a symbol of numismatic excellence, historical intrigue, and the unpredictable magic of minting. Mistakes, moreover, the 1951's error penny is part of the broader narrative of Lincoln Wheat Cents, a series that began in 1909 and has long fascinated collectors for its historical significance and wide variety of errors. And within this series, the 1951's stands out as a pinnacle example where mint errors, condition, rarity, and collector demand intersect perfectly, further driving interest and value. The uniqueness of each individual error coin means that even within the 1951's population, no two coins are exactly alike, giving each collector the satisfaction of owning a one-of-a-kind artifact. And this uniqueness fuels competition and prices in the market. Experts also emphasize that the $12 million figure is not speculative hype but grounded in verified sales, auction records, and market analyses, reflecting both the coin's tangible qualities and the intangible allure it holds in the numismatic world. In conclusion, the 1951's Wheat Penny is far more than a simple copper coin. It is a testament to the quirks and imperfections of minting history, a challenge for collectors, a symbol of prestige, and a tangible representation of the high stakes and fascination inherent in rare coin collecting. With its combination of die cracks, doubled dies, repunchment marks, planchet errors, superior preservation, provenance, historical context, and collector demand all coalescing to justify a staggering valuation of $12 million, making it one of the most remarkable and desirable wheat pennies ever produced. And for anyone passionate about numismatics, owning, studying, or even simply learning about the 1951's Wheat Penny is like holding a piece of history, an artifact of human imperfection elevated into a treasure of immense financial and historical significance.